welcome back to the Beyond Broadcast podcast, a show which takes a behind-the-scenes look at industry professionals and their lives working in the broadcasting and entertainment industry. Today, I'm speaking with UK-based New Zealander and audio imaging guru, Chris Nicoll. Chris has been considered one of the top imaging producers in the industry, not just in our country, in the UK as well, and probably globally. Kicking off his career at NZ Music hit station ZM, Chris splashed into the UK pond by becoming the head of production at Capital FM and Extra, before shifting gear and working for audio imaging platform startup Imager. Now he is the owner and operator of imaging production company and platform provider Wiz Effects. Welcome to the show, Chris. And also
Thanks,
was my ex-boss at one point.
Now.
Now. So, Chris, how's things, mate? It's obviously been a while since we've seen each other in person, but we're keeping in contact on the regular, which is quite nice.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Oh, gosh, I'm trying to think. 6 years maybe since I last saw you in person.
It might even be longer than that, mate. And it's
7
making
years.
me feel old. It might be edging up to 8 or 9, mate. I feel like that's the weirdest thing.
That's a long time, isn't it? Time goes. I mean, probably it was pre-COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pre-COVID.
Last time I saw you. Yeah, okay.
Pre-COVID,
fine, yeah.
pre-Brexit, I think even, or maybe slightly post-Brexit. I don't know. I feel like we've gone through all the historical events together, really.
Yeah. It's been a long time, eh? But when you blink and you miss it, man. Like, people say time flies when you're having fun, but I think it flies when you're not as well.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like a little bit of suffering sprinkled in really kind of makes everything a little bit spicier and keeps you on your toes. Otherwise, life would be boring, mate. It'd be like, the normal 9 to 5, same but different, So I think that's good. And just so good to be able to talk to you because I feel like in a way you were quite influential in terms of some of the decisions I made, but then in the same respect, I know there was a lot of decisions behind some of the stuff you've done, mate, because the thing is your career has been equally as interesting. For anyone who doesn't know about imaging, we're going to delve into that a little bit, as well as also Chris's career, since yours is quite a strange one. And for anyone who doesn't really understand the industry itself, it might be quite a surprise. So I guess first off, mate, we'll start where it all began, which is obviously Hamilton. And being that this will be shared with an international audience, what would be, I guess, 3 words you would use to describe Hamilton for someone who has no idea what Hamilton is in New Zealand or where it is, I guess?
I mean, Hamilton gets a bad rap. I haven't been back to Hamilton, and just for context before I give you my 3 words, I haven't spent much time in Hamilton since I was 18. I'm 42. So it's been a long time. And I have really fond memories of it. But I think the joke was always Hamiltron, the city of the future, being that it was definitely not. So I think my 3 words are probably wrapped up in the nostalgia of the place, like boring, non-futuristic, and culturally devoid. Put a hyphen in there. That would be what I think it is. But I don't know if it's like that. I don't know. I have friends that live there still, and I chat with them, and they don't particularly like living there, but they're still there. So there must be something going for it.
I think Hamilton was easily one of the most memorable, I guess, tour destinations that I had when I was playing in bands. And I specifically remember my dates in Hamilton, which were always pretty interesting. So the culturally devoid part, I would say, is not entirely true, but it is a different type of culture going from, I think, the rock venue that we played at to then going down the road. And there was a hardcore hip-hop karaoke bar that was going to about 3 a.m. That was wild.
I guess when I say culturally devoid, I mean, I'm thinking like, if unless you want to see live music, which I do, and I like live music, no problem. But I didn't, or at least my upbringing didn't expose me to much else. Seedy pool bars, terrible nightlife strip, but I was 8, I left at 18, so I didn't really go out that much there. Capital of Mormonism in the Southern Hemisphere, interesting place. But I think it, I don't know. My dad was in the agricultural business. He was a genetic scientist for a fairly large government-owned company doing animal breeding programs. So it's, it's pretty well situated in the Waikato for like fertile farms and whatnot. So it was a good place for that, you know, and actually not a bad place to grow up. I went to some pretty sweet schools, and, you know, so I've got friends that I made at school that I still have now. So, you know, I'm very aware that probably my memory of it is not what it actually was. And, you know, I don't think there's any one moment there that's led me down the path that I've followed. But I would say that my experience now of raising children in a foreign country is certainly that one of the strengths of growing up in New Zealand, not just Hamilton, but New Zealand in general, was definitely learning how to learn. Not just learning a whole bunch of shit you had to remember, just that there are different ways to learn. And once you kind of find that thing that helps you learn, I'm a really lazy learner, by the way. I'm frustrating in the sense that I don't need to take a lot of notes. I'm very much a doer. Just show me how to do it. Give me a few blasts at it. And once I've done it 3 or 4 times, that's me. And then I'll explore that thing to the very limit of what's possible. Other people take notes or whatever. But I learned that at school in New Zealand. And so I think because of that, I found my way into creative endeavors because they were hands-on, you know. So although I didn't play in bands like you played in bands, you know, I liked the idea of playing in bands, and taught myself various musical instruments, and mucked around in a recording studio we had at high school that was like mini disc 4-track recording, and
beautiful.
you know, like just awful analog gear, but fun, but awful compared to what kids can do now. You know, and always chase down the opportunities where I could put my hands on something. And that just sort of naturally led me into this world of creative stuff. And I think I toyed around with getting into advertising because I like this idea of like taking 3 or 4 unrelated concepts and coming up with an idea that links them, and that entertaining people. And obviously selling a product is wonderful. That's where you make your money. So advertising felt like that might be a good fit for me. But somewhere along the line, I had to do work experience at high school. And I mean, I'm massively condensing a lot of the years here, but found myself doing 2 weeks at, I think it was Media Works, was it called back then? Or Radio Works, sorry. It was called
Radio Works, yep, exactly.
And helping a promotions guy. It was a friend of a girlfriend's friend's friend or something weird like that, you know, a son of a monkey's uncle kind of connection. And did that for, might have only been 1 week actually. And I remember doing just dumb stuff and actually not enjoying it. And being like, I'm definitely going to do advertising because this radio station stuff's kind of dumb. I thought it might be fun, but it is pretty dumb. And, you know, stuff like alphabetizing competition entries.
Oh, that's a nice one.
I'd alphabetize the whole thing. They just chuck it back in the box. It didn't matter. I was just being given useless tasks. And then I remember on the last day, and I think that this is really, I probably owe a lot to this person. On my last day in this work experience on like the Friday, I just happened to be sitting in the office at probably like 4:00 in the afternoon, and Mike Puru, who was a night presenter on The Edge,
wow,
he walked past me. Oh, I like your shirt. For context, I borrowed my father's green fly fishing shirt, which was way too big for me. Anyway, I was like, oh, cool, thanks, man. And that just started a conversation where he invited me to help with his night show that night, just man the phones, because back in those days, you had to pick up an actual phone to get listeners to air and screen them and stuff. So I was like, cool, yeah. And that was the beginning of it for me. And I got the bug then. And although I knew I didn't want to be a presenter, I just was to be in there doing stuff. And that was my connection. And that's kind of, I guess, it's his fault. Really, Mike Puru's fault. And I've told him a couple times, so I don't see him very often. We keep in touch loosely. But if I bump into him when I'm in New Zealand, it's always like, it's all your fault. Because after I started doing that, I must have done that for 12 months, maybe, my final year of school. And my dad, he passed away quite a few years ago now, but he tells a story. He used to tell the story of I came home one night after helping out after school, and I was buzzing, and Dad's like, oh, he's thinking, oh, they're going to pay him now for all of this stuff. Like, that's cool. He's going to earn some money. And I was just buzzing because I was given a key card so I could get in after hours without having to like push the buzzer. So I had my own access, and so I had a real passion for it. Loved it. And then Mike wrote me a letter of recommendation to the New Zealand Broadcasting School, which, 20 odd years ago, that's hard to say, 20 odd years ago, that was the school you went to. There are a couple of options, but that was sort of at the time the one you went to. And you had to do
I'm going to interrupt you there, mate, because this is the thing. You're talking about a father who traditionally is in a field that's quite like higher education, scientist, and your father was very supportive of the decision for you to go down this creative viewpoint, because your mum worked in finance and banking as well, right? So two parents that are working in very like polar opposite industries, and then you move into radio creative industries, especially at that young age where you kind of already had a rough idea of like, this is what I want to do. Were they always pushing you in that direction? Being like Chris, you do it. Like, do this thing.
I was really lucky. I think my mum and dad were pretty encouraging of creative. Both my parents learnt musical instruments when they were kids, so I had to learn the same, and I went through so many. I mean, everyone in school learns the recorder, worst instrument in the world.
Atrocious.
Prove me wrong. I did piano, I tried the violin, I played the cello for a few years, I taught myself guitar. I mean, I'm shit at it, but I can play it, like you probably, there's a couple just here that I've got that I'll muck about with, and I can play drums, again, not very well, but enough to have fun. And I was always kind of enjoyed experimenting with that stuff. And I think I discovered electronic music, probably at the time was sort of Fatboy Slim, The Prodigy, and Chemical Brothers were like the thing. And I was just intrigued with how they made music. And of course, we all now know they're just sampling little things and playing them back in different orders. I'm simplifying massively. But that just fascinated me. And I was really interested in unpicking it. And, computers were a thing at home. I was really into tinkering with computers. And I just think I'm not academically stupid. I was quite good. Like I could probably have been a scientist or, a doctor or a teacher if I wanted to be. It just didn't interest me. And so my mum and dad were really good at just going, if he's not interested in it, then
no point pushing him.
Yeah, totally. The only thing I will say is the thing that hurt my dad the most was at 15 when I gave up science. And at school, and he was a bit. I know he was a bit gutted, but my parents forced me to take calculus instead of statistics. Hardest subject ever, but that was my route back into science, and I did okay at it. But like the point being, they were comfortable enabling me to pursue sort of creative things as long as I always had a backup plan.
I think it's interesting as well, mate, because you did this all at high school. Like, I think that the core difference I'm seeing maybe in people upcoming in our industry, especially now, is a lot are going straight from high school into university, doing these 4-year degrees, and maybe not even getting anywhere near any sort of media, any station, television, broadcast studio, or anything. Do you think that played a really important part in terms of your journey as well, as the fact that you kind of were self-aware and independent enough to go about it yourself and chase it rather than like waiting for the opportunities to come to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and I probably attribute my parents with that. Like, it was nothing was ever handed to me, and I had to work for it. And I think that whilst they were really supportive of the creative stuff, if it required me to put any money into it, I had to put my own money into it. So I had to work. So I had a job at KFC as a cook. Oof, I ruined Mum's washing machine with the amount of fat I'd bring home on the clothes. Anyway, you're right. Excuse me. I also think going to a school that had a solid music department and had recording facilities, it allowed me to experiment. And my parents encouraged me as well. When they're like, what'd you do at lunchtime? It's like, I was in the music music department playing drums today, recording them and seeing what that sounded like or whatever. That was always like, oh, cool, like better that than some of the other options. Generally in winter I did that, and in summer I was out, kicking a ball around with my mates. But I think that was it. And I think you're right. I think I went through a lot of kind of formative exploration while I was at high school, when nothing really, I hate to say it, but nothing really matters, in the sense that you can just muck about and it's cool, and anything that you do will be impressive because you're 15, 16. And so, yeah, I think that probably helped. I will also say that I had access to things that others might not have. Having access to the recording studio that we had at Hamilton Boys High under the music teacher, Mr. Adrian Botting. I was really lucky. Lots of people who may have been interested in this kind of stuff just might not have had access to that. And whereas today we all have access to a computer and can get the thing because it's, creation is democratized so much. Whereas in some ways you could argue that I was lucky to, just have access to that stuff. And I would probably agree with that. But I will say, and I still have it, and I know this isn't being filmed, but just off screen, if I tilt my camera, you can see all my synths and samplers and stuff.
Oh,
This little
what a collection.
Yeah. Oh, that one there. I bought that when I was 16 with my own money. It cost me $800. And if you're working in pounds, that's about, in those days, that was about £350. And it's just a little Boss SP202, terrible little sampler. I'd make beats on that, man. I'd record like little drum loops and muck around and record things. And I think I really got into that. I spent a lot of time playing with that stuff. And I guess when I finally discovered what I'm now doing, or how I have done for the last 20 years, there's a lot of experimentation and freedom that I'd had to discover that really helps. So yes, very long way to answer your question, to say, yeah, I didn't muck around with a whole bunch of boring learning. I was really stuck in on just hands-on, crack on with it. And that's how I learn. And I knew that from a very young age and was empowered to do it.
Yeah, because we've kind of discussed this before, mate. We've gone in detail about how the work ethic of New Zealanders is, as we've said off mic many a times, it's all about, just can-do attitude, just make it work. If it doesn't work, oh well, like, try the next thing kind of thing. And I remember even when, and we'll talk about this a little bit further on, how you had a mentorship program and I actually attended it with you in London, and how you mentioned one of the biggest things was just failing. Just like fail as much as you can, and if you make a mistake, it's all good because you're going to learn from something like that. Do you think that's kind of like a missing quality for a lot of people, maybe when they're just starting to kind of think about getting into these industries, is not accepting the fact you are going to fail? You're not going to be good at it from the very beginning. Do you think that's maybe an important lesson that people need to realize before even getting to the stage of going to, as you said, the broadcasting school, is just give it a crack, see what happens?
100%. I think it's become sort of part of popular culture now, all of these influencers and who big business people who try to sell you courses and whatever else. They talk a lot about failure, and it's true. Like, people fail and fail and fail and fail. And I'm going to get this phrase wrong. If you keep trying the same things and expect different results, it's the definition of stupid, I think, is the sort of the phrase. But if you try different things and get different results, and each time you're sort of reiterating and learning, then you're going somewhere. It doesn't matter if you keep failing, you are actually making progressive improvements. I guess it's like, I'm really into going to the gym. You ain't going to get stronger unless you keep increasing the weight over time, called progressive overload. And, you sort of work a muscle to failure, and then the next time it's a bit stronger and you can work it just that little bit further to failure, and you continue on that process. And I kind of think, generally speaking, all industries, we all need to fail at a thing, or not be quite as good as it could be, because then, okay, the next time I make this thing, or the next time I do whatever that thing is, I know what I didn't quite get right and can improve it. So yes, and I think again, I feel like, and maybe it wasn't, but I feel like that's something that I picked up at school. It was just like a normal thing for that to happen. Whereas my encounters with lots of people who have not gone to school in New Zealand, or perhaps at the time I went, not everyone, but lots of people I noticed they're scared of failure, and that can hold them back. So yes, I think a lot of people are worried. And I think also growing up before social media and all of that, failure wasn't stigmatized, and in that there wasn't an indelible forever record of your failure. And whereas now everything can be recorded and held onto, and that is daunting, and I think has probably forced some people to be more careful. And, nothing creative comes out of being careful. We all need to take risks and do dumb stuff and break the rules. And because it can all now be held on to forever, people don't forget, so you can't move past it. I know I've done some real dumb shit in my life that will never see social media because it happened before, but I do think that influences how people feel about failure. And that is a shame. But I do think, it's good to see. I think a lot of people are aware of it. I just don't think a lot of people live it. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
That's actually a fairly good point and a good insight because, I think you're right. I think we are getting to that social media age of the inspirational quotes where people are like, yeah, you could just keep trying. But, not a lot of people live by it. I can certainly say there's been things that I've put on the internet that are still embarrassing, but I've committed to leaving them up because it's almost like a reminder to myself of like, this is my pathway. I've come to this point. I know where I am now. So I know it's nice to reflect. And in terms of, we briefly touched on New Zealand broadcasting skills, so I'd love to kind of go back to that. And I won't rehash over that whole thing because not surprisingly, a lot of the people I've spoken to on this podcast have come out of broadcasting school. Lo and behold, I think it's because,
represent.
And it's obviously played such an important part of like birthing talent across the media industry. But I think the interesting thing I found was you did an interview for a radio imaging website where they were asking you about like your entry into the industry and how things started off. And originally you mentioned that you wanted to be a jock, you wanted to be a voice guy. And I think that's very indicative of a lot of people that go to broadcasting school. I know even myself, I had this big idea that I was going to be the jock voice guy. I was like, this is what I always planned to do. And you made a quote that you said you were probably the quietest in the room. And I really related to that because it was exactly the same experience I had. And I even remember doing the first like public speaking speech and I was just shaking like I couldn't do it. I was like, oh God, like I'm not ready for this. Do you think that's a shared experience for a lot of people and that they kind of need to have that moment to kind of find their niche and realize like, I'm not built for this, but I know that I'm meant to be in this industry? Do you feel like it's kind of like a moment you have to have?
I don't know if it's like a uniform thing, but I think that is just born out of, I think I wouldn't say in my group of friends I was the loudest, but I was one of the more sort of energetically enthusiastic of my group of friends. So you sort of go into a situation where you're like, well, this is what I'm going to do. And I think after spending all that time with Mike Pidu on helping out on the show, I was like, cool, well, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And I know all of the stuff about recording and mucking around with sound, so that'll help me, but that's why I'm going. And thirdly, although I don't think it was ever said, I think I got the impression, like sort of a subconscious impression from my mum that, I have to really be famous if I'm doing this because otherwise it's sort of a waste of time. And I can share some more hilarious things about that as we move further along in my career. But so I think I sort of walked into it going, that's what I'm going to do. And on day one, I just knew, just was like, okay, these people are more gregarious and full on than I am. And actually over that, I say it was on that first day. On that first day, I was sort of like, okay, I don't think I'm going to be a presenter. But I think within a week, once we had the tour of all of the stuff that happens at the station and all the different roles, and I kind of went, okay, I think I know what I'm going to do. And that was when they showed us the recording studios, and I went, cool, this interests me. I can do something with this.
That was your home. You knew that was
Yeah,
going to be your
totally.
base.
Yeah,
You'd
just
already
like,
been
okay.
introduced to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Computer, lots of, like, a big mixing desk, microphones. Cool. I can have some fun with this. So, yeah, I think that was probably it. But I mean, I think there were probably people who felt differently, who went in thinking, I don't want to be a presenter, and then realized actually, no, they could be. But for me, that was certainly my formative experience, I suppose. And I would say that probably most people who went use that first couple of weeks to go, you sort of figure out what you're more interested in. And the beauty of the New Zealand Broadcasting School is, because it was based at a polytech, it's so hands-on that you try everything, and you really do kind of quickly, navigate and discover what's interesting for you. So, I mean, again, to my learning style that I talked about before, it just suited me down to the ground. So it was perfect for me. Perfect. And then further on, as we honed our skills and the things we were more interested in, I'd done a lot of experimenting and mucking around with sound. So I was kind of like right at home doing more of that. And I think I probably discovered imaging itself, or, station sound or jingles, whatever you want to call it. Everyone seems to have a different name these days. We don't seem to be having less words. We seem to be getting more words for this. I wish I could remember her last name, but her nickname was Tigger or someone, and she introduced me to some production that Jeff Thomas had made, who's an Australian guy who worked at Kiss FM in LA when it was proper world famous back in the sort of 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. And that was me. I was like, this is the shit. I'm going to make stuff like that. That's cool. And that just sort of unlocked a whole world for me, and nothing else was important. And that was the thing. I sort of almost got myself on the spectrum, shall we say, with it, and was really just passionate about it and loved it and breathed it and listened to it. Like people would listen to music. I was like, I'm just going to listen to imaging back to back to back to back. So I think that she was my first exposure to that stuff. That would have been in my first year at school. But I think really in my second year broadcasting school, in my second year at broadcasting school, I think the person who probably gave me the most room, I suppose, and encouragement, and maybe not directly, but certainly by virtue of giving me space to be creative, was a lady named Karen Neal. And she was the person at broadcasting school who I think I found. She was the right amounts of kind of like a guiding person who could guide. She'd give you some nice guidance, then also a person who just kick you up the arse. And I was always been someone that's needed someone every so often to just give me a kick up the bum and go, okay, stop mucking about now. You actually need to generate something. And her fella, guy called, at least at the time, a guy called Jeff, was a production engineer. And so I learned some stuff off him. And, I think there was a lot of like really key moments there that you don't think about at the time, but now 20 years down the track, I think about it and go, if it hadn't been for that, I don't think that I would be here. I think definitely the first week I figured it out, but then it took me a good couple of years of kind of just being given that space and being hands-on and prioritizing the stuff I was into. Doing all my projects, when you had to pick a project about it, I would laser down on this and, okay, I'm going to reinvent the sound for a radio station and present it as a final project or whatever. I would do any chance I got. I would do that. When we pitched radio stations, I was like, cool. I was involved in all the sort of coming up with it all, but then it's like, cool, what's it going to sound like? Okay, I can do that. You leave that with me. I'll make this thing sound banging. I still have my original demo of the station sound for Radio Pop, which is a children's station that we pitched in our second year as students. And I still roll it out from time to time to share with people, because I think it's actually quite good. Like, I listen to it, I'm like, this is cool. Like, it's an exercise in simplicity. And I'm really, even now I listen back, I'm like, it ain't actually that bad. Like, there's a time I hated it, but now I listen to it and go, nah, this is all right. Like, would I change it? Absolutely, but it's all right. So yeah, I think those couple of years there was such a great place, and we got so many like great speakers, and no one who was necessarily around the stuff I was interested in, but lots of really passionate radio people, and good contacts that sort of build up your network as a student. And as I say, that this lady Tigger, and then Karen's fella Jeff, and Karen herself, brilliant. And I think that all of that really helped me to focus on the stuff that I like to do. I did turn into a little bit of a prick for a time there, because I was like solely focused on that I wasn't very good at kind of navigating some of the other things that are important about having a career, like being humble and talking politely. So some of those things I think I probably could have done better at the time, but yeah.
Do you kind of think it's like a rock star sort of mentality? Because in the same respect, because like you talk about you talk about a couple of influences and interviews, and one of the ones you mentioned was like Dave Fox from Z100, who kind of, I guess, would be like the equivalent of the Led Zeppelin sort of level of radio imaging producer, who's at the top of his game, and you're the young buck taking influences from each individual imaging producer, but then kind of, as you said, even at that kind of early stage, you're like, yeah, I'm hitting the nail on the head. I know what I'm doing. Do you feel like it's kind of like you gained a sense of arrogance that kind of needed to get hammered down a little bit?
Yeah, maybe. I also think it was just that I felt, I guess the story that sticks with me here is at the end of the year you would get, so at the end of your second year you had to get your internship where you get placed at a radio station for 6 months. And I accepted one in the middle of nowhere. I can't even remember where it was. The middle of nowhere, the South Island in New Zealand. I was going to be doing presenting and production, which was cool. Like, I was like, great. I like both of those things. That's perfect. But at the same time, I'd also applied for a scholarship with, at the time it was called the Radio Network, which is now called NZME. And if you got the scholarship, you got sort of $3,000, I think it was at the time, towards your fees, because you had to pay for your placement. Of course you did. Yeah, weirdo.
That's very weird.
I think that went to the university, and you did get paid, by the way. I did get paid. Yeah, so you applied for the scholarship, and then you also got an internship in Auckland, the main city where all of the networks come out of. And I found out that I was in the running for that after having already accepted this placement elsewhere. And I got a bit sick and tired of waiting, to be honest, because I was trying to plan my life. So I fired off an email to whoever it was. I can't even remember who it was. Just going, I'd really love for you guys to hurry up and make a decision. Effectively saying it like that, not being particularly tactful. Long story short, I did get the internship. I was the successful recipient of that, but I don't know how much I damaged my chances by being an arrogant little prick. Like, you got to tell me what you're doing because I need to plan my life out. It's about me. Probably wasn't the best approach. But anyway, I got the thing. I got my $3,000, which I then promptly handed to the broadcasting school for the privilege of moving to Auckland. So I think that, do you know what? That was probably the first and only time, where I'd acted in that way. And it was a real grounding experience for me, because I was kind of, as soon as you send the email and then you go, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. So that was certainly a moment for me. But
It's
yeah,
kind of like being final year of high school, isn't it? When you get that level of arrogance in the final year,
yeah,
and you're like, "Yeah, I'm
yeah.
king shit. I can do
What a
anything."
douche. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think everyone goes through a level of that in a degree, and
Oh
I don't think
yeah.
it's necessarily bad. I think, even speaking from my experience, I did the exact opposite. I was too bloody blasé about everything, and then I missed an internship because of the fact I was like, "Oh yeah, no, they'll wait for me. It's fine. Like, it's all
Yeah.
cool." I was at the
Yeah.
opposite. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I totally get it, mate.
So I mean, in the end, I don't know. Again, I can't remember where the original placement was, but that was obviously knocked on the head. And then I was up in Auckland, and I was in the commercials department, making radio ads. And I was placed. A guy called Sam Coley was the creative director at that time of the ads department. Great Northern creative. He's actually now he's a lecturer at Birmingham University here in the UK. And I've traded a couple of emails with him, but no more than that. Anyway, he was my boss, and he placed me with a guy called John King, JK, and I hope he's still around. I don't know if he is. I have no contact with him, but he was my first mentor, and he mentored me in how to play free cell. I don't get a lot of recording or production mentorship from him. But again, because of my learning style, that was fine. Because when he was sick, or when he was like, you can record this thing or whatever, that was the learning experience for me. So that was okay. It worked out all right. But I was really good at free cell. And he was the one that gave me the nickname Wiz, which is where WizFX comes from. Because his computer broke, and I just effectively turned it off and turned it back on again. And he was like, "Oh, you're a bloody whiz," and that's how we talked. "Oh yeah, we're talking down here, and yeah, right, well, you're a bloody whiz." So yeah, that's where that came from. And then one of the writers got wind of this, a guy called Ronnie Mackey, and I love Ronnie. He's such a wonderful guy, but he made that my name by virtue of saying it so often and so loudly wherever he possibly could, that I ended up just getting called Wiz all the time. So that's where the whole thing came from. But I didn't do anything all that particularly clever. It just, like, a 20-year-old kid knows how to fix a computer better than a 55-year-old man at that time. And actually, to be fair, now my kids are 4 and 6 and probably know how to fix a computer better than I do. So, it swings and roundabouts. But anyway, so I ended up there and did that, and in my evenings I would help out with imaging on ZM, which was the big CHR top 40 station that was in the group, and I loved it. I worked all hours, mate. Like, I do sort of my 9 to 5 internship, which I was getting paid for, and then I do like another 6 hours of just mucking about because I loved it. And I wasn't earning all that much. I didn't have a lot of disposable income. So it was like, well, that's to pay my rent and buy some food. Excuse me. I'm going to just spend the rest of my time mucking around with this because I can't afford really to go out or have dinners or get takeaways and stuff. And so I probably did that for 12 months, 18 months maybe. And was helping to record a show with Ian Stables in the evenings. We'd start recording at 9 p.m. on a Thursday and finish at like 1 or 2 in the morning. It was, crazy hours that I was doing. And then because I produced that show, I sort of said, "Oh, can I do the imaging for that show as well?" Which I did. And I entered that into the, after 12 months or whatever of sort of doing all these weird hours, I entered the New Zealand Radio Awards with the imaging that I'd made for this countdown show called the Rump 30. And, I'd written a lot of it and I'd produced a lot of it. And it got nominated for a Station Sound Award over top of the actual Station Sound producer they had, who'd also entered. And I think that raised a few eyebrows, and sort of within 6 months, I don't quite know what happened to the guy. I know his name, but I don't know quite. I honestly don't. I can assume what happened, but I don't actually know what transpired. But suddenly he was no longer there, and I was doing the imaging full time. So and I think one of the catalysts was there was a job going at a competitor. I was like, I'm going to apply for it because this is what I want to do. I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be doing all these crazy hours and making radio commercials with limited creative control. I want to do this. I want to just do imaging. And so they're like, oh, if you're going to apply for that, okay. Oh. And there was obviously something happened because I found myself in that job. Incredibly naive, a sort of 2021. Now as a 20-year-old, having done it for 20 years, I know what happened. I appreciate some people were moved and juggled around and some heads were rolled. But at the time, I didn't realize that. I was just like, cool, like I'm going to get to do the thing I want to do. I didn't know how that's affecting other people. So I was very lucky. And, now I appreciate what that meant for some others. But yeah, so then I found myself doing that. And
can I just go back one little step as well? Because
sure.
you were saying you're working with Ian Stables, which for anyone who doesn't know, Ian was quite a controversial sort of host within the New Zealand media and radio sphere. And obviously you're doing late night shows with him. Do you feel working with like a character like him kind of did open the door in a way because you knew you could be a bit more, I guess, on the nose, a little bit more hairy in terms of the content you're doing? Because he was well known for being that kind of racier sort of radio host. Do you feel like that gave you a lot of like space to kind of like, I can really go ham on this and make some pretty interesting imaging that maybe even goes against their brand in a sense? Yeah,
definitely. It took the guardrails off. I was a lot less cautious. I was like, do you know what? If he can operate under this idea of getting a complaint is good, then I'm going to operate that way too, which is how I just really pushed the envelope, I suppose. And, along the way, I discovered other influences as I sort of started the job and listening to much more risque, station imaging from the likes of John Frost, Eric Chase, John Frost being incredibly unhinged in an extremely creative way. And it was just really inspirational. It's just like that. Plus, working with people like Ian or Stables, which were, let's take the guardrails off and just go for it. I would rather ask for forgiveness than permission. Like beg for forgiveness than ask for permission.
Yeah,
and so that's how I operated, and actually, that worked well in terms of doing some incredibly creative stuff. Did it work well in terms of some of my personal relationships? Probably not. But certainly in terms of the output that and that was number one for me, was like being incredibly creative and incredibly like, I don't know, risque, and taking those risks that I knew other people weren't doing. So it was exciting to do. But the funny story about Stables, I have two funny stories. The first one, I put my foot wrong with him in the first few weeks of the job because I didn't understand like him and his process for being creative and for doing, what he did and what that feels like to be a presenter who is risque, and the amount of backlash that you can receive. I just didn't know any of that. And I said something to him that upset him, and boy, I got it in the neck from him, and I will never forget it. And I remember sat there and my boss, Christian Boston, saying to me, well, what do you expect? Like, of course he's going to react if you talk that way to him. And that was a big lesson for me really early on of like, yeah, okay, like to be creative and to be that creative is incredibly mentally taxing. And you do have to be respectful of people. Like, it might not look like work, but it really is. So that was a big lesson. My other funny story about Ian is my mum met him, and he's wicked with my mum. My mum was like,
I can imagine he'd be a charmer.
Yeah, she was gassed to meet him, and it was wicked. And that was, I remember my mum saying to me once, maybe, I don't know, just as I was sort of halfway through my broadcasting school course, going, just remember, when this doesn't work out, you can always go back to university. And I was just sort of stuck with me. It wasn't like a big moment. It was just like a comment. She may not even remember having said it, but I've always sort of it was stuck in the back of my head, which became a bit of a drive for, I will make this work. But I remember when she met Ian, and she's like, oh, like, you really are like working with some really amazing people. Like, it's really quite clever, isn't it? Like, I feel like that might have been a bit of a shift point for her in terms of her thinking on what I was doing. But anyway, he was definitely the person that took the guardrails off for me and allowed me to really go nuts. And I think probably over a 5-year period, I really developed that, lent into that. And, I would get complaints all the time. We had listeners complain about bits and pieces, and my argument was always, it's being heard. If someone is taking the time to complain about a dumb little sweeper or a silly promo, then it's working. But I think that began a bit of a cycle of arrogance and pretentiousness, where the creative process was above all. And I became, I think, quite difficult to work with. Is
that because you attached your identity and your sense of identity to the work that you're doing? Because obviously, if you're working ZM, 21 years old, and for anyone who doesn't know, that probably one of the highest listened stations in New Zealand, you're very young to be in such a very, like, what I would call like quite a high up position in terms of evolving and shaping the brand. Do you feel like that kind of inflicted in your personal life in a sense? Because you felt this absolute responsibility, like everything needed to be perfect, and like you expected perfection from everyone else.
This is my personality, this radio station, and but I would be incredibly difficult about things, and I can't imagine working with me in that time. But you just don't know it, because I was just so like, everything I made had to be award winning or have the potential for me to make, put on my reel to win an award. That was how I thought. So it was like, probably incredibly frustrating for many people. But I think I in the end became a victim of my own intensity, I suppose, is probably the best way to put it. And I just burnt out after 6 years. I can't do it anymore. Like, it's too much. And because of that, I quit out of nowhere. Just when I'm done, like, my girlfriend's moving to the UK and I'm going with her, and I can't do this anymore. So that's it. I'm out. I'm going to go. And I do think that was because I just had been so like mega focused to the detriment of so much, making proper friendships, being a decent person to work with. And some people may remember this differently from me, but that's kind of what I guess I come out of it going, I don't think I was the best team player. And I was prepared to do anything for the station and, do cool stuff and, have fun, but I wasn't easy to work with, I don't think.
Do you think getting that opportunity young, like very young, was maybe a reason? Do you feel like you needed like a little bit more time in order to kind of adjust to the idea of being in that position of imaging and controlling brand? Do you feel like a little bit more time, maybe a little bit lower below the fold, would have helped with that? Or do you feel like it may have happened either way?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I think I've always felt, I don't know where this has come from or when this started, so it's something I reflect on now, but I've always had very high standards for myself. And so my expectations would be that this would be how it would work. And because of that, I don't know, maybe, but I think I kind of needed to go through some of those experiences to learn from them. I think I had an amazing childhood, but I didn't have a lot of conflict. I didn't have a lot of, I didn't encounter lots of issues along the way in my childhood. Incredibly lucky, proper, like, super privileged white middle class family. And I think that because of that, I think probably there was a degree of entitlement on my way through my career of, well, I just know what I'm doing and I'm awesome at it, so just let me do it and leave me alone. So I think probably I needed to kind of hit these points of frustration. Ultimately I was frustrated with myself at the end because I couldn't function at that high level, and I wasn't reacting well to any sort of feedback or guidance from people who arguably had more experience than me. And I couldn't do it. I just was like, I've had enough. And so it's, my girlfriend and I at the time had been planning to move to the UK, but it suddenly was like, we're going, like, I'm done. Like,
and how old were you when that happened? Because that's kind of like almost like a reset in your career for like anyone who knows. Yeah,
26. Yeah, so I was at ZM for 6 years. Yeah, and funny now I look back and go, some of the work I made was just great. There are lots of happy memories, but I think the thing is, I feel like perhaps I was a bit of a difficult person, certainly to manage, if not also just to work with. Let's not say I was rude or mean. Like, I liked all the people I work with, but when you're a promotions director dealing with what a client wants, and you've got me going, no, we're doing it my way or the highway, that's not conducive to a solution. But anyhow, yeah. So I was there for 6 years, and then it was a reset moment. I wasn't going to do any more radio. I was like, Mum's right, I need to do something else.
So you look into the UK, you're like, I'm never going to work in industry again. I'm going to be going to do the classic thing of working in recruitment in the UK, like,
or a pub or something.
Yeah, a pub or something like that. Like, that was the intention. And also one other thing, because I think this is something I haven't touched on yet, the fight between production, creative, and sales.
Yeah.
Do you think there's ever going to be a resolution that creative and sales is ever going to agree on anything?
Never.
And not even advertising, ample car parking, possibly.
It's always it's almost gosh, I can't even say the word. Existential. Gosh, I do know the word. I can see it in my brain, but I can't say it properly. It will just always be there, and I think that's because clients will always want what they want. And even though they hire the experts, they'll still generally have a sense of what they're expecting. So it's. And then, of course, you've got the creative team that will go, great, this client's come on board, here are some great ideas, which won't be anything like what the client wants. And it's up to the sales manager or sales person to navigate that. But I think what 20 years has taught me is that oftentimes it's the creative people that get that wrong. And it's not the sales manager, and it's not the client. The client will always come into it with a preconceived notion of what they're getting. They have their expectations. It's the sales manager's role, in my opinion, to manage those expectations, but it's the creative role to take the expectations, understand what they're actually looking for, read between the lines. What is it they actually want? And what do they actually need to say, or what's the result they're looking to deliver, and finding the creative way to do that. And then flowing back towards the client, that's the probably with the creative involved, it's the salesperson or sales manager's job to then educate the client on what it is. But I do think that it's hard to hear as a creative, but I do think a lot of that is the creative person's role, is to navigate that, which is uncomfortable to say, but is definitely where solutions will happen. Because if the client wants the phone number 3 times, three times in a website, and they want to make sure it says www on the front of it, that's what they want. Okay, that's not going to shift. You might be able to educate them away from it, and you should try, but let's assume that they don't shift away. I don't care, that's what I want. Then you've got to find the creative way to deliver that. And I know that's hard, but I think that's my sort of interpretation of the flow. And And over time, as I move through my career, I have found by working in that way of being more like, okay, we've done something they don't particularly like. What is it they actually want? Let's look at what they want and try and figure out the sort of the DNA of it, and then reconstruct that in a way that works for the station and the client. We've had way more success. So yeah, I think the sales manager isn't versed in creative, or the salesperson isn't necessarily versed in creative. The client isn't versed in creative. So it is an education process. But I think that creative people are good at taking, creativity works best when you're in a box. It does not work well when you can do whatever you want. So you need to figure out what your box is to push against. And I think the more time spent doing that as a creative person, the better the idea will be, and the better it will serve a client or a purpose. I think that's my anecdote. Find the box. But as I say, at ZM, I don't think I was particularly, I think I did that by accident rather than design, but it wasn't always the most pleasant experience.
So then you kind of went to reconstructing yourself again because of the fact that you had this open wave of doors where the guys almost had like put all their trust in you because they're like, Chris, we've seen what you do. Work's amazing. We're not going to stop you. You're unleashed. You can go. So then you make this move with your girlfriend to the UK. And how long into that whole process of you making this move? Because I'm assuming you landed. It's not like the immediate thing was you landed in the UK and you're like, you know what, I'm going back into radio. Like, what was that process like, and what took you back to that point? Was it kind of like reconstructing yourself and being like,
a little bit.
If I'm going to go back in, this is what I want?
Well, I think when we got here, I really didn't want to. I wanted to do anything else. But it's that age-old thing of just nothing was interesting me. Just like, I don't see anything I like. I just don't know what to do. So luckily someone had a contact with someone who could get me some freelance work at a station in Oxford. I was based in London, doing some writing effectively. A Jack FM it was called. And so I just started writing shit and they'd pay me per line. And I wasn't making lots, but I was enjoying it. Then they needed someone to cover production for a couple of weeks. So I would journey up to Oxford from London. It was a long journey every day, but I did it and I didn't make any money out of it, but I just did it because it was something to do. And I really enjoyed that. And then I did a little bit of freelancing all around the place with some company called Pure Tonic that was a precursor to Real World Production Vault, and did little bits and pieces all over the place. Eventually got a job interview at Capital in London as an assistant producer, and I didn't get the job, but they needed someone to cover for a week. Side note, I didn't get the job because I was too casual in the interview, which was another eye-opening experience for me of like, okay, there's that classic New Zealand charm of being a bit sort of affable and relaxed that doesn't always go down so well. So that's why I didn't get the job, because I came across like I didn't care when actually I cared immensely, but I was just trying to relax myself by being casual. Anyway, I was asked, okay, the guy that we want can't start for a month. Can you freelance or just cover for 4 weeks till he can start? And I had about £10 in my bank account. I was like, I'm close to calling mum to get me a ticket home here. So I was like, yeah, cool. I'll do it. I got no shame. I did those 4 weeks. And I remember at the end of those 4 weeks that my boss, eventual boss, but the guy who was my boss for those 4 weeks, a guy called Arden Hanley, was like, we made a mistake here. We should have hired you actually. So, he kind of strung me along with little bits of freelance gigs for, a few more months, and sort of juggled a few different sort of bits and pieces here and there for other places. And ultimately in the end, they made a position for me. And then I started there full time, I want to say April of 2010. And that was it. I was in the door then. Within sort of 6 months, they were launching the Capital Network across the whole country. At that time, it was just in London. And they rejigged positions around, and I ended up finding myself as the deputy head of production very quickly, and underneath Arden, so sort of as number two, if you will. And then he just spent the next however long, can't quite remember how long it was, schooling me in all things, working in an organization the size of Capital, and which was owned by Global, so really the size of Global, and navigating what was really quite an intense and difficult environment. No less fun, but definitely very different from the environment in New Zealand that I was used to. And it was incredibly humbling, and actually something I really needed. It grounded me, gave me a lot of like, okay, hang on a minute. Like, the way I used to be it's not appropriate in this context. Like, I have to be much more considerate. And anyway, long story short, eventually Arden, he left and I took over as the head of production and was there for 5-ish years. And, in that time, I think the big thing I learned there was how to manage people poorly. And I think a lot of that comes from you manage as you're managed.
Yeah.
And I think I had probably 3 or 4 different program directors as bosses in my time there, all of whom were very different. But I ended my time, and I liked all of them. They were all great people. But I think I ended my time being managed by Rob DeVideo, and he was excellent. And I think I learned a lot about compassion from him, even though at the time I don't think I realized it. And I was under an immense amount of pressure and stress, and I was not I was quite dictatorial in what we would be doing and very hands-on and very much a micromanager, because I would field calls at all hours of the day if there was a problem. And so I didn't want to field calls at all hours of the day. So I didn't want there to be problems. So the only way to avoid the problems was to micromanage. And so I think that at the time, I felt like that was what you do. Now I look back on it and go, I was a symptom of a culture that existed. But be that as it may, again, we were very successful, winning some awards for some of the work we did. We launched Capital Extra, and the launch sequence, we won like a gold something or other. So we see a lot of the work that we did was really well received in the industry, and it was sort of flying in. Don't want to say that awards hadn't been something that the business had won before, but it felt like it was a bit of a different time where a lot of the other brands under the Global stable weren't necessarily seeing that recognition for some of the work they were doing. And yet here we were just churning out like, really impressive station sound and getting rewarded with that. So that was really nice, but also became a justification for how I operated again. So here we can see I'm in a cycle where I burnt out again. And I was becoming difficult to work with, and not so much with people like sales or, promotions managers and program directors, but people who worked for me, I became quite difficult to work with because I was so controlling of every element of how things should sound, because I didn't want to have the pain. I wanted to be able to have, I wanted to be able to go home. They were long days, but I wanted to go home and know I wouldn't get a phone call at 2:00 in the morning. So I was, again, difficult in that sense, but I was much easier to work with people around me, I feel, or at least a little bit. But I burnt out again, just too much going on, trying really hard to continue to be like this next level thing. And I ran out of steam. And so I quit in 2014. Was it 2015? Can't remember. I just quit though. My dad, 2015, I just quit. I'd found out my dad had like terminal disease, and I was like, okay. And Global were amazing. They gave me loads of space and time, and that was great to sort of be with him. I flew out to New Zealand and spent some time with him. They gave me loads of time to grieve when he passed away. But while I was in New Zealand, I was just like, nah, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And by which time I'd met my wife, now wife, someone different than who I went to the UK with. And she was just like, you just do what you got to do. Like, and I think I looked at it as like, it was so intense, the work I was doing. And then I saw my dad he died at 67 and he'd worked really hard on his career, a fantastic career. And he was an amazing dad. But he I feel like he had a couple of years of retirement and he died. He sort of missed out on what is meant to be what they say some of the best years of your life. And I sort of looked at that and went, do I want to work that hard? And I don't want to work like that till that time. And then, so I'm done. I'm going to quit. And I quit on the spot with nothing to go to. I had no visa to stay in the UK. I don't know what I was going to do. I was just like, I'm out. I'm done. And I sort of had like a 3-month notice period with which to sort out a visa, and to find out what I would do for work. And I got a visa through my wife, now wife, but at the time we weren't married. No, we were. We'd only been married like 8 months. So I was like, great, now that we're married, you can be my sponsor and I can stay. So we did that. And during that sort of process of sorting that out, Wise Buddha approached me to look at heading up their service called Imager, like a production service. And for those that don't really know what that is, just like sound design, music beds, lots of pre-made bits and pieces to make cool imaging. And I was like, this sounds great. Sort of managing this product, starting as a creative director. Eventually I ended up being a general manager for a bit, managing the product, learn about business a bit more, don't make a whole bunch of production because I kind of think I'm done with that. And so I went to do that. And that was an interesting experience in itself. I was there for 3 years. Lots of ups and downs, but I think if I may summarize it briefly to say, a great group of people making great stuff, but I felt I don't know if I was always as passionate as I was while I was there that I had ever been before. Like I feel like I lost a bit of passion for what I was for imaging a little bit, lost my way for a period of time, and so I focused on like management and business stuff, and I enjoyed that part of it. But I got a little bit disillusioned with the idea of I could see what they were charging us out at versus what we were getting paid. And I kind of, got me a little bit funny, I suppose. I could completely understand it. I totally get it, but it did get me a little bit funny. But, some of the cool things that came out of that, the mentorship program we established, we found a guy called Jamie Larson, I think. He was pretty decent.
Oh, odd fella.
Yeah, he wasn't too bad. But also it was a lot of fun doing stuff like that and sort of paying it forward. I think we had you and we had another guy, Jake Cusworth, and we had
Do you think that also changed you in the mind of how you're working? Because you were talking before how you felt like you had to micromanage a lot of people that were working under you, which I'm guessing were junior imaging producers who are up and coming. Do you feel like maybe in a sense having that pressure taken off you where you feel like you're having to constantly perform at the highest level gave you more room to feel like you could be a mentor in a positive manner rather than feeling like you had to mentor in a way that like, this is my way that I do it. I want you to reflect my way because I know it's going to be good compared to feeling like, go for gold, open it up. I want to see what you can do, and then we can talk about it afterwards rather than being like, be a carbon copy of me.
I think being at Imager and Wise Buddha, we were so many talented producers who I knew were better than me. It's like, I don't need to get in the way here. This is brilliant. I can learn too. And I think that was, again, and that's a great question, and a good sort of insight there. I walked out of those 3 years with that feeling of, I don't have to be that person. I can actually encourage more people to do it their own way and for that to be okay. And so I came out of those 3 years with that attitude. And I wish it had happened to me sooner. I wish I'd had that attitude sooner. But I came out with that attitude, and I came out with sort of a slightly disgruntled financial feeling going, hang on a minute. We're charging out at X. We're getting paid Y. I wonder if I can do something for myself here. And so that sort of brings us to WizFX. And that had bubbled away. As soon as I moved to the UK, I incorporated it just to capture some of the freelancing work initially. And it's just always, it was always this little side hustle thing. You know, someone booked me to do some freelance work. I'd put it through that just to rope it off. And it would, you know, help me buy a new computer every few years or whatever, just little things. And I thought it was, you know, I had, while I was at Imager, I had delivered them their first, well, I believe it was one of their first years of profit after having been in existence for 4 or 5 years. And they wanted me to triple it. And I sort of felt it wasn't possible. But was sort of overruled by the board, which is fine. That's how that goes. And so I said, listen, that you're welcome to feel that way, but I don't think I'm the person to do that. So I'd like to just step back and be a producer, you know, just chill out and just do some of the stuff, because I think I want to go back to doing that. And I did that for sort of 6-ish months under Wise Buddha, and I made some cool things and I made some pretty terrible things. And I don't think I really impressed, which it's one of those things. Just didn't. And again, I just don't know where I was in my head at the time creatively. I wasn't as focused as I had been in the past. Anyhow, that sort of came to a natural end. Nothing particularly, no animosity there, just kind of just fizzled out. And I was kind of like, my income's drying up here. Shall I just try WizFX for 12 months? You know, my daughter was 1.5. We had a second one on the way. And my wife was like, if you don't do it now, you'll never do it. So give it 12 months. And if it doesn't work, I'll go find a job. Like, I'll work in a coffee shop. I don't care. But I got to do this now. Otherwise, I will always kick myself for having never tried. And so I threw myself all in it. It was, and just myself at the time. And I worked like a dog. It was almost like working like I did in my first year at ZM, or, you know, the creative department at the radio network. I was working mad hours, but I just went nuts. And, you know, we sort of developed this production service element to it, and I was doing loads of freelancing and that. And as I was starting to do that, so let's say I sort of committed fully to that in November of what year did COVID hit? 2020?
Oh, 2020, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. So 2019, I fully went in at like November 2019. And then by January, COVID was coming. And I was freelancing at the BBC in central London. And by March, I was having to go in every day. So I'd do that. And then at night, I was doing all my other freelancing under the Wiz banner. And then I by March, when Joe was only a couple months off giving birth, they sort of said, oh, you know, COVID could affect pregnant women. They didn't know. And I just said, I'm not coming in anymore because Joe's about to drop. So they were really good about it. Yeah, you work from home. But then that same week I said that, everyone worked from home. I remember that first lockdown. And yeah, so then that was really sort of opening the gates, and I ended up with loads of freelancing coming in, and I was just saving as much as I could. I took no money out of the business, just enough to sort of live, and then managed to start hiring people and building this thing. And you know, I think it sort of peaked with sort of 5 of us. And you know, that's been it for the last few years. And it's grown quite well and kept us pretty busy. And we've done some cool stuff. You know, we've pitched for some jobs. And by the way, really different kind of set of skills. Lots of really creative skills are flexed, but lots of business skills like, you know, pitching for work, monetizing it. You know, are we charging the right amount? A lot of that kind of stuff. But we've ended up doing stuff for BBC Radio Wales, which, you know, some people might sound like a bit of nothing, but we checked a life box there because we actually worked with a live orchestra for one of the pieces we wrote, and they recorded it for us, and we could use that to create some of the jingle package. You know, that's amazing. We actually got to go up to Cardiff, go into this theatre, witness the recording, approve the record. I was amazing, like just insane. I'd have never got to do that. I just don't know how that would have happened if I'd stayed in New Zealand. It may have, but certainly for me, it just felt like, wow, this is it. And what was even cooler was my mum was visiting at the time. And although she couldn't come to the recording, she was just like, wow, like, okay, this thing that you've stuck at for 20 years, it's pretty cool. Like, yeah. We've done lots of neat stuff like that. We've done some cool stuff. It's cool jingle packages and cool imaging packages. And yeah,
Actually, going back to that, mate, you said your mum was like, yeah, it's been 20 years. You're still at this. It's going well. And I think this leads into a very good question. Does your mum actually understand what you do?
Oh, I don't know. I think she does. I think she does more now.
She does now.
Now that I work, wow. Yeah, there's another part to this that is probably not super well known, but which we can share in a minute. But yeah, now I've done a lot of stuff for myself, and having seen, because we filmed some of that and I showed it to her and played her the video, and then because she was here, I was able to be like, so Kyle, who is my composer at Was FX, wicked dude. He's in South Dakota. He just writes in Logic and he spits out the sheet music and we take it to Cardiff and they play it. And so Mum could I could play her. Here's what Kyle wrote. Here's what the orchestra wrote. Oh, sorry, here's what they played. And here's what we've done with it for this radio station. And I think that, I don't know if it was one of the first times, but it was one of the first times for me where I felt I was able to really articulate quite well the process. So yeah. I would say one of the other things that's always been quite good is Mum always used to love when I still lived in New Zealand, Mum would love turning the radio on and hearing my voice. Obviously not anymore, but that was something that was like, okay, cool. Like, so I don't know. But for me, it was like a really nice moment, made me feel proud because I could see that my mum was proud. And I don't know, that wishy-washy wanky stuff, I know, but emo stuff. But like, I do think that was like quite a special moment. It's quite cool. But yeah, so like, it's been such a different thing doing the Was FX thing. And, we are, working with stations all across the States, all through Europe. We've done some in Africa randomly. We've done a couple of little indie computer game things, like it's just loads of podcast bits and pieces. It's a lot of fun, a lot of different stuff going on. And it really kind of scratches an itch. But it's now I'm on the flip side, right? So having worked somewhere like Wiseputter and Imager where you see the money and you go, oh, this doesn't make sense, charging so much and paying X. And now being on the other side of it going, we have to charge that huge difference because it pays for all of the stuff that we need or all of these people that are involved in this project. It's not just one person. So yeah, I sort of almost done a bit of a 180 there in terms of understanding that process and being comfortable with it. But I think also, to just nod to some of the people that have really helped on that journey, Sam Parker, who I worked with at Wiseputter for a time, and who he interned for me at Global back at Capital way back when. Just like really bright, smart guy. He's currently on a sabbatical at the BBC away from Was FX, but really helped a lot with kind of forming a lot of the monetization and understanding what this is actually worth. And in some ways, just someone who has an outside perspective, really. And it was really incredibly helpful. Kyle, incredibly, with all his composing stuff, he's written everything from like Mombaton all the way through to orchestral, regal BBC Wales and everything beyond, trip hop and alt rock and all sorts, indie rock, which he'd never heard before. Write a track like Oasis, who, like amazing.
Incredible.
So people like that, I've been really blessed with people like that. And a guy called Julian who developed the site, and our app, who'd never done anything like this before, but I just knew he could do it. So I just basically forced him through about 7 mental breakdowns to get it done. Much more respectfully than I might have before, I'll just add. But no, I mean, the achievements of these people are just outstanding. Um, and someone that's been with me, who you and I both know, who's been with WizFX the longest, probably 15 of the 20 years it's existed, is Boff, Richard Boffin, and
And
just
veteran.
always runs through brick walls and does a great job of it. And I've always found working with him really, I know we have a way of working that I think a lot of people struggle to have with others, but I know we just kind of get each other and it just works. A lot of people joke that he's my son in some ways, but I do think there's this weird kind of connection. Like I can say a thing to him and he knows exactly what that means. It can do something really, really awesome with it. So yeah, these people just help. And then there's another guy, one last guy who should get a bit of a shout out, a guy called Tommy. Tommy won't let me pay him. And Tommy is just like this amazing king of like nerdery, just knows and does some really interesting things. He loves radio production as well, so he does a little bit here and there, but he also just does some interesting behind the scenes kind of things. And then he'll just come to me and be like, we just had a conversation this week where he's like, I just built a machine at home and I've just got AI running on it and I'm starting to mess around with how that might be useful for things. I'll let you know if I find anything that's good for you. You're like, great, like stuff like
Okay,
that.
cool.
So, yeah, these people really, really have helped. And I love that it's almost grown a bit beyond me. I think there was a time where people, because of my nickname being Wiz for so long, people associated WizFX as me. Whereas now I think it's associated as, sure, I am still there and I'm still part of it, but there's these other people that are part of this creative process. And I love that. And that's always what I wanted for it. I didn't want it to just be me. So, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think,
I think it goes back to
proud
something
to
else that
have
you've said,
done
mate.
that.
Because you've mentioned in another interview that you said that a positive spirit will take you a long way, and to just not work so hard. Do you feel like you finally got to that point with WizFX, but also do you feel like that's kind of how you built your team around you as well?
Yeah.
Because you've mentioned Boff being able to work with you quite successfully, Sam as well, where you feel like you two kind of just get each other. Do you feel like the positive spirit is kind of something that's continued on for you as well, that has kind of been built around the business?
Yeah, I think positive spirit, I think, can do attitude, not afraid to get things wrong. Giving it a go, I think, is the big thing I've learned. We talked a lot about failure at the beginning. I think to resurrect that and say, now I feel that failure is the most important skill. But giving it a go, and not caring about the outcome is almost the first step to embracing failure. Like doing it knowing you'll fail is quite difficult, but giving it a go and not being so worried about it is an easier way to think about it. And so I've sort of got these people around me that are like that. And I just want to highlight, I mentioned Sam's on sabbatical with the BBC for a while. And so we backfilled him with someone called Sachin Muji. Sachin's he's an Indian bloke. He's based in Auckland in New Zealand. I didn't hire him because he's in New Zealand. He's a Kiwi now too. He's got his books. He's got his paper slip, but I didn't get him because he was a Kiwi. It's just, he was just around and expressed an interest in helping out. And, he's doing stuff he's never tried before. But he's just like, yeah, I'll give it a go. Like, and that's all you can ask for. Give it a go. Like, I can help you get my experience. I know I can help someone get from, first iteration to final iteration. And maybe that takes 2 goes. Maybe it takes 7. Maybe it takes 1. I can do that bit with you. But if you're prepared to give it a go, then that's great. So yeah, I think I've definitely now, all of the things that have happened in managing teams and working within teams and failing at that, or perhaps identifying the things I felt I failed at, have really sort of helped me to steer into myself into a much more like collaborative, friendly place of like, let's just all give it a go. And, I can massage it and your style or your, approach and help you grow. you don't have to do this in a way that you don't learn. So, I think, yeah, I feel like surrounding myself with people like that has really helped. And what's interesting is the bit that, is probably not, it's on my LinkedIn, but I've not really shouted much about it, and only because I don't think it really deserves a lot of shout, in the sense that, I kind of feel a bit differently now about making big deals about things. I late, what are we, 25? So late 23, I was approached by Bauer Media to join them as I don't know what, excuse me. I was approached by them to join their team, their imaging production hub, as a sort of, the job title is Director of Station Sound. And so I joined there in January 2024. So I've been there just about a year. And I've been juggling WizFX on the side, completely all above board. But that's been a really interesting experience, again, because I'm dealing with much bigger team of people and creating solutions, and find myself more in a coaching, mentoring, and guiding role than necessarily making a lot of stuff. I have made some things from time to time, but mostly I'm just there to kind of help guide and, structure the sound by way of saying, I think perhaps these things, what do you think? Those are some great ideas. How do we, I know that the stakeholders want these things, and I know that creatively you want those things. How do we push that together? And I'm working with the heads of station sounds on that. And that's really, really interesting. But as I say, it meshes quite well with what I'm doing with Wiz, because I'm not doing a lot of production at Bauer. I'm doing much more kind of mentoring and coaching, and kind of guiding and trying to find those little incremental improvements, but not necessarily acting on it myself, encouraging others to. So it sort of almost feels like a nice second, it's the next evolution of kind of my career in terms of learning that management and that mentoring and building good people up rather than myself, which I think was always the bit I got wrong. And that's incredibly rewarding, to see some of the successes already from some of the people that are on the teams I'm managing is weirdly much more pleasing, than, oh, I won another trophy or a certificate that says I'm pretty good. To see someone else do that is that hits me in the spot, it's really nice. So,
is it kind of like you being a parent now? Because obviously you mentioned before you've got 2 kids now. Do you feel the parental role has almost played a little bit of a part in you getting to the stage of being like a mentor? Because you're seeing what your kids are doing, them growing up, and you're looking at the potential young imaging producers coming up, and you're you see similarities or reflections in that same style.
And I think I've always been someone that's been keen to pay it forward. Always knowing that if someone wants help, I would always give it. Always have. But I think, definitely now being a parent and going, I can do so much more, and that's not to say that people don't. It's just to say that I've really enjoyed exploring that idea of well, listen, you don't need me to do it for you. I mean, as a parent, you don't want to do everything for your kids. You want them to learn to do it themselves. And so, my daughter wants to learn to tie shoelaces. We're getting there. It's taken a while, but it's about that journey and getting her to a point where she feels confident to try. And she's confident to try. She gets a bit frustrated when she can't. Makes you realize how hard it is to actually tie shoelaces. Especially when you're used to tying them on yourself and then you have to teach someone else to tie it on them. So it's actually really...
Oh, mate, it's a challenge.
It kind of messes with your brain a little bit. Anyway.
Yeah.
But I think, it's taught me a lot. And I don't know, my kids would probably say I'm not the most patient person, but I think my patience has improved tenfold since having children. But I think a lot of it does feed in. the pride I get when the kids get a certificate or a damn sticker at school is almost comparable to seeing someone that I'm working with at Bauer or at Wiz or any client get a thing, some sort of reward for their work. It's like, oh, that's cool. Like I had a small part to play. It's not just me. There's lots of other things that feed into that person's success, but it is just really nice. Yeah. And they did it, but I like to think, well, you know what, like my little bit, that makes me feel real proud for that person. And yeah, I do get a sense of that the sense of accomplishment I would have got for myself, I now get for other people. And that's really, really nice. So I think I'm leaning quite hard into that. I'm really enjoying that part of that job or that role that I've got there. If funnily enough, that then backfills across to Wiz because I'm doing so much more of that there that now for Wiz, I'm doing so much more like training and mentoring and trying to like coach people to find the solution themselves rather than just present it to them. If they get frustrated, I will just help them. But you know what I mean? Like it's knowing that balance and stuff. And so I find that fascinating. And if you'd have told me 20 years ago that I'd be at this point, I'd have been like, nah, like I'm going to be the world's best imaging producer. And I'm going to be like, nah, like super focused and no one's going to tell me what to do. And now I find myself almost on the other side going, that dude was a bit of a dick. Like, I am very much more of a collaborative mindset, and in no way offended if my ideas are the ones that are used or not. But the best idea should win, and the best thing should win, and it doesn't have to be me; it could be anybody. And that, to me, is actually what I suppose I see my role as now is just enabling the best decisions, not necessarily being the person with the best decisions.
I think that was always going to be evident, even when I was like working with you and being mentored by you at Imager, because I know that was kind of like the first kind of foray you started into looking at mentorship more seriously. And even then at those early stages when I came to deal with you, even though I never went into imaging again, it was interesting to see that you were making that pivot towards that sort of mindset and personality, and that has in no way kind of affected you in terms of your career. If anything, it's actually opened your career a lot wider. You've become a very respected voice in imaging. I know a lot of people, when they speak of the imaging industry as a whole, your name is frequently brought up, and I think that's reflective of the collaborative work that you're doing with so many young producers up and coming. And I know even now, I'm assuming you're still checking your inbox for people sending you work and demos and Skype tapes and everything else, I'm guessing, yeah?
Yeah. I would say it doesn't come in as often, I think, but I still am asked to give my thoughts on things, and I love doing it. I don't always have time, but I love to do it. I think it's a more transferable skill. As you yourself with your own journey, I think being solely focused on imaging for a long time, it came at the detriment of transferable skills. And I think probably the first 10-ish years of my career, I was too narrowly focused. Maybe even 15 years, I was too narrowly focused. And the last sort of 7 to 5 have been a little bit allowed me to broaden some of my skills, and a lot of them are soft skills. They're not like I can type on a computer. It's interacting with people and listening, and I don't know, encouraging them. All of those soft skills, luckily stuff that AI can't replace. But all of those soft skills, I think I've really enjoyed massaging and exercising, and they're getting better and better and better. I wouldn't say I'm by any stretch of the imagination the world's best mentor or any of that shit, but certainly, it's been a lot more fun to exercise those muscles, and I enjoy the reward of seeing other people's success through doing that. So yes, and you're right though. I think there was a subconscious pivot at some point. But obviously it worked because I've kept leaning into it, and it's worked again. So I've leant even harder, and now find myself really enjoying that. So, it's nice to balance that. We're still making a cool sweeper here and there, but, it's certainly not, you know, the way that the industry is going. There's a lot of change to come. And I think technical skills are important, but not necessarily the core function anymore. I think a lot of soft skills, being creative, knowing a good idea when you see it, or not, lack thereof, those will be more important in the near to mid future, sort of the next sort of 2 to 5 years. And so I'm glad to be exercising those, because I think it gives me a little bit of longevity as well.
Because that was the thing. Initially, when we were about to start having this chat, I thought it was going to go down this deep rabbit hole of talking about AI and how maybe it will change the industry. But in reality, you're totally right. Nothing is going to take away creativity as a whole and the soft skills that are needed to kind of create these sorts of projects. Yeah, you can use AI as an enhancer to produce, obviously, this type of audio content, but it's never going to fully replace it. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. There is going to need to be a human element.
Yep.
No one can replace it. Everyone made that assumption even when AI was first introduced, and still even now there needs to be a human element. It's never going to be perfect. So I love the fact that you've taken that.
I think the analogy I like is, and I can't remember if I read this or if it's just like a thing I figured out. I don't know. So please, don't attribute it to me, anybody. I'm sure lots of other people have thought this too. But AI is effectively just spitting out more of the same. It's trained on stuff that exists, so it will just spit out more of that. And that's great. But if you want real creativity, you need a person who can come up with something a little bit different, who knows how to combine 3 random ideas into a new concept. Fantastic documentary, Everything is a Remix. Watch it if you haven't. But effectively talks about how there are no new ideas. It's just about how various concepts are packaged together, or various ideas are packaged together. And I'm a firm believer in that. Like the t-shirt is not a cool idea. Putting a stencil on a t-shirt is not a cool idea. But the fact that my t-shirt says Hail Santa, now that's an interesting idea instead of Hail Satan. And on the back of my t-shirt that I'm wearing right now are all the tour dates for this band called Hail Santa. And of course, they're all the 25th of December, and they're all in different cities around the world. Now, there's nothing new about any of those things, but they've been put together in a new way that makes it creative, right? And maybe that's not the best idea, but you can see where I'm going with that. AI wouldn't generate that for you. Now that we've generated this t-shirt, now that this t-shirt exists, AI could, but before it couldn't, because it didn't know about the idea. So I think that that's the thing people need to keep in their minds, is AI will definitely speed up a lot of the repetitive, non-critical thinking tasks. But when you require critical thinking, when you require soft skills and creative intuition, you will still need a human. I personally use ChatGPT as a sort of brainstorm aid, but not the final thing. Like, give me 10 ideas about this thing. Give me 10 t-shirt colors. Okay, give me 10 band names. Okay, how am I going to combine those into something interesting? Or, it can be a great way, instead of getting on Google and getting historical references, going, ChatGPT, can you just give me sort of one line about some historical stuff that happened 20 years ago? That might tap into an interesting idea for some creative around something that happened 20 years ago. I don't know, some nostalgic thing. I don't know. But I sort of use it more in that way. And I think there are lots of great tools for cleaning up audio, splitting out stems of tracks, lots of that kind of stuff, creating music on the fly, which, I appreciate is a touchy subject. Some people are for it, some people aren't. But these things exist, and it's how you use them. They're not ultimately built to replace people. They are built as tools to encourage us to be more creative, to augment us. The danger we face is all of these wonderful tools. Is it going to put us in a position where the people with the money who are paying us, whether that's a boss or a company owner or a client, are they going to expect more hole-in-ones faster? So more creative ideas, but in less time. which I am worried they will. They'll go, great, well, now that you've got all these AI tools, you can just hole in one every 5 minutes. Great, I'll get a million ideas out of you a year. So that's great, and I don't have to pay you as much. I fear that's where we're going. What I hope is we go the other way, which is, okay, you've got all these great tools. We're not going to give you any more work. Now you've got more time because these tools save you, hours so that you can spend more time focusing on the creative output or the final product. So you still have the same amount of work, but you've got more time to think about it. That's what I'd prefer, because ultimately you get more creative solutions. So that's I guess that's the thing that weighs on my mind, is which way are we going to go? And I think it's hard not to agree with me that I fear that we will go the way of more hole-in-ones more quickly, rather than fewer hole-in-ones that are better developed or better practiced, because money talks.
Yeah.
And that's my concern and my worry for creative industry as a whole, not just what we do in imaging. So I think, again, to the soft skills, that's going to become more important, is to educate people here of, well, hang on a minute. Yes, you could have more ideas quicker. They're not necessarily going to be that great. Whereas you could have really outstanding work if you continue to give people the space, but let them use the tools to speed up their workflow to give them more thinking time. So I can spend 4 days thinking about the thing and 1 day producing it, rather than 1 day thinking about the thing and 4 days producing it. You know what I mean? So I think, that's going to be interesting to see where we go. But as I say, I fear we will go the way of more ideas more quickly.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I think the scary thing is people will mistake necessarily ideas as having emotional connection, which is where imaging has its strongest point. It has the emotional connection of the person who understands the brand, the audience, and knows how it can relate to that audience through the use of imaging.
Yeah.
So it is a bit scary. And we've talked about this at great length, as well as also talked about obviously young talent as well, which I think is one final point I wanted to ask you about, is where do you see imaging going from now outside of AI and everything else? Because we've talked about young up and coming imaging producers. What is your kind of future look towards this? Do you feel we're going to see more imaging producers come up through the folds, or do you feel like it's an industry that is going to change, and maybe with that, people up and coming are going to change as well? What's your kind of thoughts on that?
It's definitely in for some change. I would say I have noticed a distinct drop off in people that are interested in it in the last 5 years. There just isn't anybody around that's, I speak at a lot of student radio conferences over the years. I've done it sort of the UK one I do most years, and I would definitely say that less and less, people are interested in it, but after I would do my talk, less people would want to pick my brains after about, how do I do this? So I do think it's becoming less interesting, but I think it's also because radio is fundamentally changing. The landscape of media is so different. I don't know if I'm the best person to kind of comment on what I think will happen to radio over the next sort of 5, 10 years or 20 years or whatever. But I would say that with a lot of the tools that are coming onto the market, audio production tools especially, you actually don't need to know anything now. They will help you know stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are people who will go, you need to know the science and the physics behind it all. I personally am quite interested in some of that stuff, but that doesn't mean everyone is. And if there are tools that are on the market that shortcut a lot of that stuff, but deliver great stuff, that's fine. I think probably, and I think you and I have talked about this previously, I think where a lot of people, maybe my generation, sort of elder millennials, elder emos, I sometimes like to say, given that my favorite music is, My Chemical Romance. I feel like those of us that are that old have built careers doing one thing. I've just done this. Imaging has just been that thing that I've done. even though I've widened my skills into other more transferable things, this is what I've done. Whereas imaging really is a bit part in a wider career in audio. And the tools on the market that exist from an AI perspective will change some of those jobs and things. Sure, of course they will. Some will disappear, some will be augmented, but there'll be audio jobs that exist. And imaging is just part of a journey through an audio career, as opposed to a career in its own right, which I think probably is the big difference here. And it's probably why we don't see, excuse me, why we don't see, or I don't see as many young kids getting into it. Because I don't have to. There are other things, whether that's podcasting, whether that's games or music or film or whatever. There's so many facets here that at some point they might touch it, but it's not necessarily the thing to do, the only thing to do. So I think that's the big difference. Whereas, as I say, 20 years ago, I'm going to do imaging, and I'm going to do it for 40 years, and I'm going to retire and go to an old folks' home for imaging producers. Yeah, so I do think that's changed. And actually, I will be so bold as to say, with radio, I think America has realized that huge networking and massive syndications and stuff has stripped all of the localness out of radio, which is what made radio so powerful. And I think there's a realization there. Now, I know that the UK has done something similar where they've done a lot of syndication and co-locating and stuff. But I would argue that a country like the UK, there are differences between regions, don't get me wrong, but I feel like it's homogenized enough. There's enough shared culture between all the different regions that it's okay with what's being done. But I think ultimately, in the long term, more niche products and those will attract people, niche rather than one size fits all. There'll always be a place for the one size fits all, but people will gravitate more towards niche communities over time, and smaller, but more niche and more engaged. And so I would imagine that trend occurring online would also occur with media consumption. So perhaps, as I say, I'm not so bold to make predictions about radio, but maybe that's mine. Ask me in 20 years and it'll probably be proved wrong.
And if people want to find out more about your work, Chris, and obviously what WizFX is doing, how can they find out about your work and obviously get in contact with you, mate? Yeah,
of course. WizFX.com. So that's a W and an I and two Zs and then a letter F and a letter X.com. You could Google it, and you could Google it spelled wrong, and it will probably help you find it. And you can use the contact forms on there. You can hear some of the work we've been doing, or just email me, chris@wizfx.com, or find me on LinkedIn. I have other social medias, but I barely use them because I'm old now. So yeah, LinkedIn's the one. If you find me on LinkedIn, that's fine too. Stick my name in, you'll find me. There's not many of us around. And I'm a joker posing with my wife, who's far more attractive. And shoot me a connection and drop me a message. Happy to chat.
If you like the podcast, I'd love for you to leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform and let me know your thoughts on the show. Don't forget, you can reach out to me via Instagram @BeyondBroadcastPod or via email @BeyondBroadcastPod@gmail.com. Until next time, take it easy.